Welcome to Be in Tune. Join me, your host Darian, and my producer Joab, as we have conversations that deepen our connection with our higher power, ourselves, and the world around us. So, get ready to tune in, turn up that volume, and welcome to the Be in Tune podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Be in Tune podcast. It's been a minute since I've done an intro like this. So I'm just so excited. I'm so excited to be back, but I'm even more excited for today's guest. Y'all don't even know. Okay, I know I say this about practically every guest, but this guest she's near and dear to my heart. So let me just read her bio and then introduce her. And then I'm going to let her do the talking because she's just a fountain of wisdom. Okay, so Iliana Panameño is a deputy director of digital media at a labor union. Okay. Iliana began her career organizing for immigrant and workers' justice in the greater Boston area. Later, she went on to work in communication at the largest property service union in the country, where she led regional member communications and strategy for the Northeast. She is also the co-founder of We Ceremony, yes, a digital platform dedicated to centering the stories and experiences of women of color. Iliana believes strongly in transformative justice and fighting for a world where everyone has access to good jobs, safe and stable housing, free healthcare, and freedom from fear of detention. She holds a master's degree in macro social work and is a 30 under 30 El Mundo Boston honoree. I remember that day, and I think I lost my voice for screaming so hard for her. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me introduce you to my girl, Iliana.
Thank you both so much. You both are so sweet, and I feel really, really honored for being here with you both.
Ili, you sound so sophisticated. I love it. Hi, amiga. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. So I'm really happy that you're here. Thank you for saying yes. I know you're a busy gal, so I really appreciate you taking the time to just be here with Joab and I. And I really wanted to have this conversation with you because, as you know, I always tell people that you're the CEO of a nonprofit, and you're like, that's not what I do. And I was like, correct. Then I tell people she's just fighting for a better world. And you're like, okay, that's still not what I do. But your passion for others and for community and for justice, if you're ever near Iliana, you're gonna get that like right away. You're gonna sense that, you're gonna feel that, and you even gonna want to be like, when's the next protest? Because I'm right there with you. So I just want to know more about, like, how did you get this passion? Like, where did this passion start? So tell us your life story, Iliana. Start from wherever you would like to start.
Thank you, Daddy. And well, first, thank you so much because, we talk about this all the time, but I really value your friendship and your support, I would say, along the way too. And I think that's another huge aspect of being in community with one another, right? Is having people around you that are always supporting you in different projects or just like experiences that you're going through. So yeah, I really not only value our friendship, but also admire you as a person and as a therapist and just like one of those pillars in my life. So yeah, thank you for having me again, and to Joab as well. But yeah, I guess a little bit going into just like how I got into this work, but also like why it means like so much to me. I actually don't know if you know this story, that Ian, but well, you do know that my family and I, we grew up in the Back Bay area of Boston, and we lived in an apartment complex for like about 15 years. And my dad was the live-in maintenance worker in this apartment complex building. So rent was free for us for 15 years. And that's, usually something really unheard of and also just makes you think about like stable housing. And that's why that's also an issue area that's really important for me. And so, as you imagine, among 15 years, like everyone that lived in our apartment building was family, right? And my sister and I were the only kids. I'm the oldest sister. And yeah, so we were basically everyone's kids. And the best way that I describe it to people, it was like living in the episode of Hey Arnold, because it was like people from all different walks of life, like different religions, race. And so, yeah, it was just a very great place to grow up in. And during that 15-year mark, my dad had a new boss, and his new boss really did not like my dad. And I think it ended up being a discrimination case, actually, but she really did not like that my dad was advocating for different tenants, that had health issues, or if someone had like a disability and needed a ramp, for example, or someone needed to get like their rug clean, and she really didn't like that, nor like the relationships that my dad had built with tenants, right? And so she had unjustly fired him, and said that he, couldn't, of course, like work there anymore. And because the job came with an apartment, right, like housing, that also meant that we had to move. And so this was like 2 weeks before the holidays. And I just remember my dad was in his room when he told my mom, and he was like very, very like white and green at the same time. Cause like, as you think about like being a provider for the family and like having like daughters, there's of course, a lot of stress and anxiety that comes with that. And so my mom was very much like, don't worry, we're going to figure out what to do, or like next steps. And another person that lived in our apartment building was actually a community organizer, and he heard about what happened to my dad, and he was like, no, we have to fight for this. Like, what do you mean you're just gonna leave? Like, no, we have to get everyone together. We're gonna start holding like meetings. We're gonna start calling our city councilors, writing op-eds in newspapers, because this story is really important. You've done so much for us, so this is us like showing up for you and your family now, right? And so we started having meetings in our apartment, and I just remember being like, I don't really know what this is, or having like a language to name like what's going on right now. And of course I know that I love my dad, but I didn't know how many people loved my parents, right? And how many things my parents had done for others, because my parents are very like giving people, and that are in solidarity with other people, and they don't do it to then be like, well, we did this for so and so neighbor today, or like we help them with this. They just like do it out of their kindness of their heart, but also their love of community too. And so I just remember being very like proud, and just like feeling very powerful too, right? When you have so many people behind you and that are like willing to fight for you. So my dad got his job back, and that was because of the organizing that happened, and people coming together and making noise, right? And saying like, this is unjust. So he got his job back, and it was tricky though, because of course it's the same boss, and my dad didn't really feel as comfortable, being there anymore. So that sort of like encouraged my parents to like buy a home, outside of Boston. And then we moved to Malden, which is like about 20 minutes outside of Boston. And fast forward, then I got into community organizing work, then went on to work to another union and started doing communications. And that same organizer, that his name is Andrew, that lived in our apartment building, I was at an event and I was covering it for my job. And then he was also there. And I just remember this was towards the end, and we both like walked up to each other and we are like, oh my goodness, this is so crazy. Because by this point, it's been more than like 10 plus years, right, afterwards. And he's like, what are you doing here? Are you here like as an just attending this event? It was like a book reading event. And I was like, no, I like work here, work in communications. He's like, oh my goodness, that's so amazing that you went into this like sort of career path. And I'm like, yeah, and a lot of it is because of like the work that you did to get people together and to be able to name an issue and say like, this is not right, and we're going to do better, right, by like workers and by people. And so it was just like it was such a huge serendipitous moment, right, to be able to then see that one person again that did help and be in solidarity with my family, to then be able to like verbalize and say to him like, yeah, you did so much for us, but also I think like the power that we garnered from that experience and being able to say that back was just like really, really beautiful. And so, yeah, I guess long story short, I think that experience and just how my sister and I were raised, that's where that passion for community comes from. And it's like community, but also seeking, I think, liberation as well, right? Because like if our neighbors are not, if we're not thinking about our neighbors when we're talking about like justice, right, then that's not like full liberation. So yeah, I would say that's where that comes from.
What did I tell you, Joel? What did I tell you?
Nothing.
Wow.
What did I tell you? Didn't I tell you? Didn't I tell you when I was like, we're gonna have Iliana on and just watch, just watch. Ili, I've never heard that story before. So you were correct when you were like, I don't think you know the story that he. Wow. Wait. Oh, hold up. So 2 weeks before the holidays, your dad got let go from his job.
Mm-hmm.
And your mother, like, if you can, I mean, you weren't your mom, obviously. You may not know exactly what she was feeling, but how is it that your mom was just able to be like, say, it's going to be okay? Because I understand your father, like when you said he was just pale and green, like
devastated.
He's a provider. And I know your dad is like that guy. Like he likes to be there, likes to get things done for his family. But how did your mom have that assurance? Because it's like it's 2 weeks before the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, so my mom is a social worker. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from, right? Like, I think it's a job that you're sort of like helping people manage different crises, right? And like sometimes like different mental health situations. And yeah, she's also just the rock in our family as well. So I would say part of it is career, but also part of her, like just way of being. But yeah, I imagine that she was also like uneasy inside, right? And like devastated and not really knowing, like, I don't really know what we're going to do next. But yeah, I think it's interesting in different like stressful situations, like folks that, because I would say that I'm similar in that way where I'm just like, oh my goodness, like so much anxiety, but we're going to get through this in some way or another. Or it's almost like gaslighting yourself, like everything's going to be okay. You know that meme of the dog and fire?
Yep.
But it's like everything's going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. But also I would say that my mom has a very like, she's a very calming person, a very calming energy as well. So yeah, if I were my dad, I'd also want to be, I think, in a situation with someone like that, that's sort of like, we're going to figure this out together, and be very reassuring in that sense.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Your mom is that girl. Your mom is just that ride or die. And actually, when I was like thinking about our conversation today, and like questions I wanted to ask you, I remember like sending it to you. I was like, hey, there's this question of like, how did you get to started? I thought you were going to start off, the convo saying, oh, my mom's a social worker,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm following my mom's footsteps. So that's pretty much how this, I became me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nice to know that that's part of it, but it's also amazing for you to have experienced it. I mean, it wasn't amazing at the time with the anxiety and the worry, right, of where your family's going to go. But what an amazing experience you had to see someone say, this is not how this works, and this is how we're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And to bring the people in. Now, you were talking about how I knew my parents helped others, and I love my dad. I didn't know people loved my family. Can you just like expand a little bit more on how, and even thinking about it now as an adult, like how does that make you feel, like to see like a whole bunch of people just say in the building, say, no, this isn't wrong, and we're going to stand up for one of our own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Thank you, Daddy. And it, yeah, made me feel very, very proud. And of course, I'm still very proud of my parents as well. And I think at that moment, I just remember feeling like, sometimes as you're growing up, you might not have like the words to be able to name like, oh, this is this or this is that. But I do remember feeling very proud and for my parents being my parents, and like I mentioned too, like feeling very empowered as well. um
Mm-hmm.
I felt that way and too. And yeah, it was just very beautiful to witness and to see, because we were having multiple of these like community meetings to keep people informed of what was going on. And then Andrew, who's the community organizer that lived in our apartment building, he set up my dad with like a lawyer, because he was like, no, this sounds like discrimination, like let's try to seek it out. So yeah, it was very exciting to see like not only people showing up for one another, but also someone like Andrew making the connections, right? And being like, I might not have like the legal background experience, but here's this person that does, and I'm going to connect you with them. And I think that was something that attracted me so much to organizing, right? It's like you're building power, and also you're connecting people to like different resources, and guiding people through that.
Yeah. Your folks, though, I could imagine when Andrew's like coming up to them, maybe that first time to say, no, something needs to be done about this, and we're gonna kind of organize ourselves and make sure you get the help and the assistance that you so rightfully deserve. I could only imagine your parents being like, okay, like maybe having some anxiety around this, because community organizing in our respective, countries, like where our parents come from, it doesn't happen as often as one would say that would happen here. So I can also imagine them just being like, hmm, okay, we'll give this a shot, and we're going to be praying that this works out. But I can also imagine them having maybe some doubts about this, and wondering, is this really going to work? Is that something that you kind of experience at your job from the folks that you help? When
Mm,
you're trying to put something together and you're trying to organize something.
yeah.
Sorry, that was like a really like not the greatest way of asking that question, but I
No,
think you understand what I'm saying.
it's a really good
Asking.
question, Daddy, and thank you. And I appreciate you sort of like piecing the different parts of the story together and making it more like present to like how it makes sense. So no, I appreciate it. Yeah, I think like before I jump into that, to clarify, in El Salvador, there actually has been a history of like organizing. It's been mostly around
Okay.
like the 80s and 90s, around like the Civil War and a lot of injustice that was going on. So, and there continues to be organizing with the current administration in El Salvador too. Unfortunately, a lot of people are being like silenced, and it doesn't look like the same way as here, right? Or people don't have the same
Mm,
rights. And I think when you mentioned the doubtful piece, I would say, and I love this like um podcast and this interview right now, because it's great, because Daddy, and my family, and my parents, and you have that insight, so so I appreciate that.
thank you.
And I think separately from that, I think I can only imagine that they were doubtful. And I would say maybe that comes more from like the cultural piece of like not really sharing your business with other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, I imagine that they probably didn't immediately tell like our extended family members. That's only what I imagine. I imagine that maybe like the folks that lived in our apartment building like knew about it first. And then afterwards it was getting bigger, and it sort of became this like campaign thing. Then I imagine that my parents started sharing with extended family. But yeah, I think like sometimes culturally you're just like, we're just gonna figure this out, but not everyone has to know about it, right? And I respect that, and I understand that, and then sometimes injustices happen even more so, right, in silence as well. So but yeah, that in your question, I think, was if the people when I was organizing with or currently working with, like union workers, union members, sometimes feel doubtful about what
Mm-hmm.
organizing is or what organizing looks like. I would say yes. That sometimes. people are doubtful. When I was organizing, it was majority Salvadoran and Haitian communities, right, around like temporary protected status and more solidarity around that. Also, like police accountability work. So that looked a little bit different as well, right? Because for some folks, it was some people's first encounter with being involved in organizing work, or they had heard about it, but because I'm going to speak from Salvadoran experience, because of the Civil War, people, still have a lot of trauma for that and don't want to be involved with any kind of like protest, any kind of like going to city council meetings or speaking up. So I would say that, yeah, people specifically in that situation were more doubtful. But then, as you start building relationships with people and you start meeting like weekly and getting to know other people's family and folks in the community, I think, and winning, right? Because that's a big important part of like campaign work and organizing is winning and putting like actionable goals. I think then people then come to their own and are sort of like, oh, okay, so this works, right? Like we are making a difference in XYZ area. And yeah, I can go on and share other examples, but didn't know if, yeah, you wanted me to expound on something.
Girl, you can talk as much as you want.
You're so funny. Don't give me that permission because it's going to be like 5 hours.
I love it.
A lot of editing.
No, but actually, thank you so much for clarifying. That you were saying, let me clarify. There actually has been like community like action work, right? But I love when you said it just doesn't look. It may not look what it looks like here in like in El Salvador, and just thinking about DR and its history. Actually, like if I really think about it, like our history, I'm just gonna be honest. I'm not always so involved in my father's and my mother's respective countries, like politics and what's going on there. I know I get updated every now and then, right? Especially if it affects my family members.
Mm-hmm.
But it made me think about like La Mirabal sisters and Dominican history. Like that all started with them just like coming together, having the secret meetings to the goal to overthrow the dictator Trujillo at the time. So thank you for just taking that moment to like check me and say, let me clarify. I'm like, girl, you right. Because if I think back, yes, it happens everywhere, right? Community like organizing, but it just will look different for for many people. So I really appreciate that. You're so smart, girl. You're so smart. So let me then move on and ask you this: like in your job, right? I asked you how do people, do you have people that come with doubts, right? And you're like, yes, of course, based off of trauma, based off of history and such. But tell me, what is the most challenging thing in your job, and all the jobs that you've had when it comes to doing community work? What would you say is something that a challenge that you've run into maybe repeatedly, or maybe it's a recent challenge that you have experienced? You're like, I really, this is hard, and maybe this causes me to lose a little bit of motivation to do this work. Which that's my second part to this question. Have you've experienced maybe that burnout or that loss of motivation? Because you talked about having some wins, but we also know too in life there's a lot of losses that happens whenever trying to accomplish a goal. So can you speak on that?
Yeah, for sure. I would say when I was like more on the ground, like organizing, I would say that was a huge feat in itself. My job currently looks different right now because I'm on the communications end. So there's like, sometimes there can be a little bit like day-to-day challenge maybe, or just depending on the campaign. But I would say, yeah, with community organizing, it's very labor of love. And like I had mentioned before, we were organizing around like immigrant and worker justice issues. And so this was around like Trump's administration. And we started at the organization I was working at, La Comunidad Inc., was starting to build an organizing campaign Because a lot of people were coming to this organization and just like sharing with us that, you know, their neighbor had gone missing or an uncle had gone missing, and just like all these different very similar stories. And then we had come to find that it was like the local police was collaborating a lot with like immigration. And so like whenever they came into a counter with like an documented person, they were just immediately calling immigration to like pick them up. So this could be anywhere from like um you know, like a parking violation. It could be anywhere from like, you know, accidentally going through like a red light, and then when they found out, they would just immediately call immigration. And as we know, that's unjust and it's unfair. And we know that the US is just a deportation machine for many, many years now. And so we started building a campaign around that and just doing a lot of education about our rights among the community, but also meeting with police and doing the education for them that this is actually like, this actually is not a part of your job, and you actually shouldn't, this is like you're putting more hours into something that's actually not a part of your job, right? And they're actually like separating families and people. And so then it sort of became into like police accountability work. And yeah, that was very challenging in its own, because, you know, it's like a different mindset that you're meeting with like police, you're meeting with like community members. These meetings are in Spanish, which I really, really loved and appreciated, because many times these community meetings are actually in English, but then they're interpreted into Spanish. But the majority of the people that were coming to the meeting were monolingual Spanish speakers, right? So it only makes sense that they were in Spanish, and actually the police had the interpretation equipment. But even having to like manage with them, or some of them not wanting to even use them, and I remember being like, you need to use it if you want to know what people are saying, just like very deadpan. And they're like, okay, fine. And then would like put it on. So for me, that was very challenging, I would say, like day to day, because these are the same people that are harming my community that we're meeting with, right? And so I would say in that sense, it was very hard also because, as we know, it's a system, and you can feel very small sometimes and trying to push for these like changes. And yeah, there were some wins that came out of that campaign. And then from the power that we had built among members, we were then able to build other campaigns like around like better public education schools and having more funding. We were able to push for one of the superintendents there at the public school that had been a superintendent for more than 30 years and had sexually harassed I don't know how many different teachers and students and parents. We were able to push him out because of the organizing work that we had done before, because we built power, because we were making ourselves more known in like city council meetings, and more folks were speaking up that were parents. And even though they were, you know, Spanish speaking monolingual parents, they were just asking and demanding of more, right, as parents and as being people in the community. So yeah, I would say, like you said, Darian, that motivation comes from seeing those wins, or seeing people step up into their truth, into their power and their leadership, right? That maybe ones were like, oh, I don't even really want to go to my kids' like parent teacher conference because I don't speak English, or like, I don't really want to ask for an interpreter, to then being like, I'm going to speak up and share my truth in a city council meeting, and this is not how it should be, was very like empowering and motivating for me. And then definitely the challenges, like I mentioned to you, in terms of like this whole system that we're trying to go against, I think was sometimes I was like, I think I just need a day to not really like do anything, right? Because you're hearing people share their traumas, their stories, their experiences, and sometimes it feels like there's not a solution, right? Because it is something that our country, I think, leans on for so long, right? For decades and decades. But then there was glimmer of hopes with just like different wins and different victories, and like connecting people with like resources that were needed. And
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna teeter in a very, well, some would say it's a little dicey territory, but you can handle it, Illy. I know
yeah,
that.
I like dicey. It's all good.
But with, you know, not to get like, I don't really want us to get political here, but to speak to like the political climate of today's time, right? Especially everything centering around immigrants and all of that. What are your thoughts and opinions about like folks who may not have the understanding of like why is there such an influx in immigrants, right? How are they going to quote unquote take my job type things, like if you were to educate someone, right? And how do I want to phrase this question? Joel, feel free to step in if you have a better way of phrasing it. But it's like, what can you speak to in the political climate that's specifically surrounding around immigrants, and how can we educate people and whatever it is that you're going to speak to, because there's a lot of folks and a lot of people who have worries and concerns of like there's
Mm-hmm.
just like an influx of foreigners, right? How does this affect me? How does this affect my family? I'm trying to survive here.
Mhm.
I'm trying to put food on the table, so and I think there's a lot of fear there. So if you don't mind speaking on it, Illy, and I mean, if you do mind, then just tell me, and then we'll move on to the next question.
No, thank
If I
you.
could also just add on to that too, I think, and just like what Darian was saying, a lot of the view or the perspective is always negative. Focus
Thank
always,
you.
like
Thank
you were
you.
saying, Darian, like,
Yes.
are they going to take our jobs? They're going to take, our housing, so everything's always in a negative light. And I think of like the recent, the news with like Haitian immigrants and how
Mhm.
everything that's going on in Springfield, Ohio, like you always hear like the negative light. But I guess, yeah, if you could also just add on, like, I don't want to say the positive side, but yeah, like if you could just share like what's like, how is it a benefit for, for the immigrants? Why is it a necessity for them? Because I think, like Darren was saying, just not having that awareness of like what they're actually going through can kind of help shed some light on why it is a necessity. So yeah, if you could also share, I guess, like the positive sides of, having immigrants come to the country and how that benefits them and also us, the US, I guess, if you can kind of tackle that.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you both. I appreciate the context. And I think maybe before I start, I know Letty, and you had mentioned about like not trying to get like political, and and I appreciate I just seeing
Yeah.
you laughing, Letty, and I appreciate that, and also at the same time, so much of my work is political, right? And like the values that I stand on, and I believe wholeheartedly that everything actually is political, even if you're not as involved, because really how you show up, right? Really sometimes
Mm.
like determines different things. So like I think, first, thank you both, because it is sort of like this big question, and I'm going to be speaking from what I believe, like personally, right? And I know there are probably others, maybe not, maybe some will. But I actually believe in not having any borders at all, right? Being able to live in somewhere where people can just like cross borders. And so this is where I'm speaking from, right? And I know a lot of people would be like, absolutely not. Like, I would never want that. And then I'm also going to be speaking from my experience, because that's what I can speak on. And that's from what I know, right? From my parents and from family members. And um, so, I feel like, especially when there's like election season, this is like a huge rhetoric of like immigrants are killing people, they're like raping people, they're eating XYZ, they're taking away our jobs. And that, Ian, you started to speak on this, that we know that fear is something that really builds a base, right? We know that
Yep.
fear is what builds people that are racist, that are homophobic, right? All the isms. And that for some people is what gets them out to vote, and I think a lot of it is like education, what you're saying, Thaddean. And maybe some people don't want to take that time to educate themselves because they're afraid, and they don't know who like maybe certain people are from certain communities, and like, oh, like what kind of like values are they bringing? They're not the same as ours. They're taking away jobs and all these things. So this has been something I would say that even before Trump has happened, right? In terms of like this rhetoric and always like minimizing people, right? And minimizing people of color, and immigrants of color by race, socioeconomic status, and all these things. And we also know that the US has intervened in a lot of these countries of people that are migrating here to that have destabilized these countries, that have gone into these countries. And I'm speaking from El Salvador to be like, in the name of democracy, we are going to come in, we're going to intervene, we're going to switch your government upside down, and then we're going to leave. And then it leaves countries in desolation without support because they weren't functioning in this way before, right? And so like, when I was organizing and was having to deal with like so many racist people like day in, day out. And that was another huge challenge, right? From like city councilors to school committee members, people that worked in city hall, that worked for the city, right? There was some points where I'm like, oh, okay, I feel like maybe this person feels a little bit more open to learn. But there were other times where I'm like, I'm going to protect my peace and I'm not going to like, spend time trying to educate to this person that's very like hateful and doesn't really have an open mind, right? And so like even in that time, which when I was organizing, and I had mentioned it was mostly like Salvadoran and Haitian folks, and it was very beautiful to see that there was like solidarity among one another, because I would say that even sometimes, unfortunately, that you can be an immigrant from another country, right? There's always this like, well, I'm not like this, or I'm like not like that, right? And I'm going to speak specifically from the Salvadorian side because there's like a lot of colorism, right? And I'm going to, the accountability is important in that. And yeah, it was very beautiful to see that solidarity and say like, hey, like folks in our community both have like temporary protected status. A lot of folks, right? Because of different, there was a huge earthquake in El Salvador, and the US like granted permission for people to have like temporary protected status. And in Haiti, I believe it a hurricane that people started.
I think it was also an earthquake, if I remember. Yeah.
And so there is a lot of solidarity among one another for that, and of like having each other's backs for that too, like in different meetings, if people would say something like very like offhand or very racist. And when I say people, I mean like city councilors or like police, and like having each other's back around that. Yeah, so I think my viewpoint is like, yeah, if the US has a history of going into different countries, Latin America, right, destabilizing, and then our people are upset because people are seeking refuge here, it just doesn't make sense to me, right? Because like you're the one intervening in all these other countries, so of course people are going to be then coming here, right, for and people don't immigrate just to immigrate, right? They're immigrating because they're fleeing from violence. Their economy is not doing well. It's in shambles, right? They're seeking health care for their children. So I feel like that's the stories that you don't hear, right? That people, for example, during El Salvador Civil War, the US was investing in the 80s and the 90s $1 million a day into the Civil War, right? And so like, you just think about like, yeah, I mean, if you're going to be decimating a country and, killing people and destroying somewhere, and there's really not like a system to sort of pick back up again, like, what do you mean that you think that people are not going to try to seek that, elsewhere, like a home? And so I think that's what sometimes like people don't know. They don't know that history. They don't know the intervention and the imperialism that the US has brought out to like these countries and into the Haiti too, right? Like we know that they like randomly in history have come intervened at different times. So like I think if people are trying to seek safety and refuge, we have all this money for war always, right? There's always billions of dollars that we have for war. We never seem to have enough for people that currently live here, like whether it's for housing or for healthcare, childcare, all the things, nor for people that are trying to immigrate to safety. We did have a lot of money though when more for like white immigrants, right? If we're talking about like white European immigrants, we always tend to have money that comes out of nowhere. But if it's like Latin America, like other, now we're really getting into now we're getting more into it. But
I don't know if I opened up the can of worms or not, but go ahead, girl.
But if it's like
Talk.
Latin American countries, African countries, Caribbean, right? Like islands, there doesn't seem to be resources for that. And so I just think it's important for us to do the education first, right? Our own selves.
Yes.
It's like why do people immigrate? What are those stories? How has the US been involved in this? Because most of the time the US has been involved in one way or another. And yeah, I think a little bit is also just like taking care, I think, of ourselves too, because there's so many things going on. And it's important, I think, to have your ear to the ground on what's going on, but also being like, how do I take care of myself too? Because it's very heavy stuff that, you know, people like Trump's base is saying about immigrants, right? And that's creating just like a lot of fear. And then when there is so much fear, you actually see more violence too against immigrants as well. So yeah, I don't know if I answered the whole question, but let me know if you need me to follow up, because I was sort of going everywhere.
You definitely did, and I love how you pointed out not just education of the status of on the immigrant side, but also education on what the U.S. has kind of the role that U.S. has kind of played as well. Because I think that's one part we don't really hear as much. It's not really taught in schools, not really shared in the media. But if you were to speak to the immigrants, they will definitely tell you they've definitely played a role in how our current status. You mentioned Haiti, and I think one of the main things that I always even heard, I never lived in Haiti, wasn't born in Haiti, my parents were, but I always hear was how the Clinton administration had a huge part to play in terms of like rice production and how that was so crucial for Haiti. But their administration kind of really demolished the whole entire sole purpose of even producing rice in Haiti, and how that crippled, the structure and finance and farming, agriculture, and to this day, we're still suffering the effects of it, but that's just a portion that we don't really normally hear. And that's just one country, right? There are several different ones, like you mentioned, that are suffering in a very similar way. So it's like you said, I love that you pointed it out, because it's important to kind of educate on the role that the U.S. has played, not saying that, we should, and I feel like the argument whenever we do try to tell people that they should educate on like what the U.S. has done, is they'll try to defend and say, well, we were just trying to go in to try to help, which may be true. Like that may have been the intent, but that doesn't excuse the fact that it still may have crippled them in one way, shape or the other. So I think it's important to kind of, again, look at the whole view and just educate on both sides. So I love that you really pointed it out. I think that's very crucial.
Education. So important, because it is amazing the things that Americans do not know about American history, because they're not taught in school. And I'm just being honest, and let me just be very clear to our listeners right now. This no shape or form, this conversation is not about trying to push an agenda here on the election. No, not at all. I could care less, to be honest with you, on what you decide to do in that voting booth. And the reason why I can care less is because it's your choice. Interesting how that word got thrown out there, right? But when Iliana says something very interesting, she said everything is political because it's how you show up. And it is, I just love that you said that, Illy, because it's so true. Because it's a good question to ask ourselves, how are we showing up in the world? How are we showing up? And one way that we can know how to show up is knowing where we come from. What is our history? Acknowledging our experiencing, acknowledging another person's experience. And that is something that in this country that I do love, right? And I definitely see the pros for it, right? It's something that I think we can do better at. We don't always acknowledge our history. We don't talk about some of our histories. It's amazing how some things I find out as an adult, I'm like, how come I didn't know about this? like, I was, oh my goodness, like just learning about the history of Thanksgiving itself. I'm like, okay, there was no way that two groups just sat down to have a meal and there was like a whole turkey there in the center of the table, right? And all was well, So I think what is as uncomfortable as it is for people, and this is something that I see, something that we touch on in psychology as well when I do therapy, it's like you gotta acknowledge your history. You got to acknowledge your past, whether it be good or bad, because it's definitely going to affect how you're showing up in the present. So, thank you for getting political with us, Illy, because right on. Because I wanted to ask the question because I was like, this is the work that you do. You're working with immigrants. You're well, now you're working with unions, right? But you've worked with immigrants and you've heard their stories, and you've worked with law enforcement as well, and just trying to bridge whatever divides there, trying to bridge them and trying to change the world and trying to have those very uncomfortable conversations so both sides can, you know one can be heard and acknowledged and validated, and the other can actually do better, right? And move forward and actually create a change in the system. It's important, it's valuable. I don't even know what I'm saying right now because I feel like I'm rambling because the whole camera thing threw me off a little bit. But does that make sense, what I'm saying? Y'all
sure.
catching what I'm putting down?
Yes.
No, that definitely makes sense.
But like, come on, people, educate yourselves. It's not that hard to do, to be honest with you. And with technology at our fingertips, it's good to just ask the questions. If you're fearing something, it's good to ask, where does this come from?
Mm-hmm.
Where does this statement, where does this belief that I have, where is this stemming from? Where is it coming from? I mean, this is something that you would do in your therapy sessions when it comes to a negative core belief. It's definitely something that you can do when you see something fearful or you hear a hate statement, right, or a hate speech, right? It's good for us to just ask the question, where does this come from? What do I need to know about this? And be open to hearing and understanding and seeing things for what they are. And like I said, be open to learning about the history of where you come from and also in the country that you so love and that you value, because there's no perfect place. Every place has had a messy history. We just need to learn how to acknowledge it and keep it moving. Okay,
Awesome.
now I feel like I got a little like on my soapbox and be like, just do better. Now
There's truth to it though. I honestly
yeah.
like there, and it makes me think back to like what you're saying of like, I think what Iliana was saying about the fear part. Yeah, there is that fear of acknowledging, or even just doing the research, because, and that, I think, like you said, that goes for anything. That could be research of your own history, research of, where your trauma started or wherever. I feel like it would apply to any area, but specifically for U.S. history, I think there's a, what do they call it? Where it's like I forget the term for it, but like, it's like when the rug swept under, like pulled from under you, where you had this reality of like how, the U.S. is, and, or how, your life is. But once you learn a piece of history that kind of like shines it in a different light that, contradicts what your reality was, it really just, pulls the rug under you. And it just makes you kind of think like, wow, like I've been living like a false life or this false kind of like reality. And that kind of makes you feel uncomfortable, insecure, because your security was wrapped up in that reality of what you originally thought. So I could understand, the fear of not wanting to do the research for history, or not wanting to do the research of like, how has the U.S. had their hand in other countries, because that kind of just makes you think, have I been a part of the problem? Have I been living a lie? And that makes you feel, uncomfortable. But I would definitely say like, yes, I understand that, but that still shouldn't stop you from like you said, acknowledging it. So I would definitely challenge you, just get past that first part of just doing the research and being open to whatever you do find, and acknowledging how you feel about it, because it's a reality, and it's the reality that is real that you do need to experience, rather than the reality that is shaped up or what was brought upon you in whatever way. So I definitely love that you pointed that out.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, it could be very like earth shattering for some people, that it's like, you know, your whole world perspective sort of changed, like you're saying, Joab. And yeah, it's still though important also, like you're saying, to still continue to do that research and acknowledge and being able to like name what the issues are, right? Because it's also for our own personal growth, and in continuing to mold that perspective, that new perspective as well. Like, how can I actually be then a part of good? Then, let's say if my history was bad, and that doesn't determine what you will do in the future either. And I know that, Ian, that you were talking about like earlier about like, you know, immigrants taking our jobs or taking resources and those things. And I was just remembering in my current job that I work at a union, we represent a lot of workers that work for the state and are contracted by the state. And I believe it was last year that the budget had come up and their salary raises were looped in with the money for like the shelters for migrants. And so then it became this huge thing where a lot of our workers were like, we should be, because a lot of our workers actually work in some of these shelters, and for the state. And so it became a thing where, like, you know, sometimes like the most racist and hurtful people are like the loudest, right? And we're complaining on social media, like, our salary should be funded and not like the migrant shelters and, you know, things like that. And then, of course, our communications had to change, where it was like, you know, we shouldn't be pitting people against one another. Instead, we should be reverting and thinking like, why isn't the state funding both groups of people, right? Because sometimes when there is this rhetoric that, oh, there's not enough money, there's not enough resources, we always knew, no, there's money somewhere. So that should actually be the conversation. Like, why aren't people getting the same access to things instead? That should actually be the conversation. So it was good to be a part of that, and to be a part of where I work now that didn't fall into that rhetoric of like, yeah, our workers deserve this because they're on the front lines, right? And instead became like, everyone actually deserves to be in a place where they're safe and to have good jobs, good salaries, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes, 100%. I think there's a lot of rhetorics, right? That, you know, that are out there that if you really take a moment and think about it a little, just a 10 seconds, a little longer, you could be like, but that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Or, but how did we get? It's like when someone once, I was hearing the rhetoric a lot of like, you know, if you're on the East Coast of the country, of course, it's like you feel like there's no house, like housing is an issue, right? There's no space. And then you hear people say, well, we don't have any space for anyone to like come in, anyone new. Like we can't let these immigrants come in and just take our lands and our space. And then you think about it, you're like, how big is the US? How big is the US? How much land is there in the US? You know, and it's just
using stolen. It's also stolen.
Iliana.
And also, I don't know, there just always seems to be space for huge like tech companies or Amazon. But right, for like people, we never come to like want to invest in actual people.
I opened the can of worms. I know what I did. I knew it from the minute that I asked the question. I felt like the Holy Spirit's like, you better tread lightly.
Edit.
I'm crying. It's like the Trojan horse there. You open the door, she brought in the answer, and like in that answer was different like political answers behind it.
It's
like yes, more answers are coming out. I was like, oh, I just wanted that one answer. Yeah. No one getting. That's why I was like, Iliana. But hey, you are not wrong, my friend. You are not wrong. So yes, like educate yourself, people. I think we could just go
Full circle.
Put it right there. Yeah.
yes, let's just go back. Let's just go back to educate yourself. So, Illy, with the amazing work that you do and hearing your passion, my friend, right? Tell me what is the best thing about your job, or the best thing about the work that you do, because you've had several jobs, but like I feel like the essence of your work is like that theme is it's continual, right? It's been
Yeah, I think the best thing about my job is being able to help people share their stories. And so whether that is for when I was organizing, for example, like prepping to share your story in front of a city council, like board, or whether that is helping to like share your story in a press interview, right, with like a news outlet, or for like a short video on social media. I think that's the part that I really enjoy the most, just because yeah, sometimes it can be hard to share your story, right? Or knowing where to start. But I think the process of being able to like prep someone to do that, and what is it really that you want to get across? You know, what is our messaging, and how can those sort of like be combined together? But also how empowering it is to be able to share your story, even just like in a regular space, like outside of your job, right? And whether you're meeting with like friends or family or meeting someone new, I think it's just something really powerful and something that people can't take away from you. And at the same time, that you're crafting your own narrative, right? And so when I used to work at another union, that the majority of folks were monolingual Spanish speakers, and they were janitors, a lot of them that cleaned, you know, different commercial spaces all over Massachusetts, but mostly like in the Boston, greater Boston area. um you know, some people were sometimes like, oh, I don't really want to know if I want to share this, or and of course it's like encouraging and training people that you can share whatever you feel most comfortable with. You know, someone isn't gonna like pressure you to share something that you don't want to. And also how these stories sort of that you do share, and the more that you share them, sort help combat other narratives that are very harmful and very dangerous, like getting back to what Joab was saying, right? Because like there is a very harmful messaging out there right now about like immigrants. So then like to combat that a lot of the times isn't taking what you're hearing and then breaking it down, but it's actually sharing your own personal story. Like, this is the reason why me and my family immigrated like however long ago or recently. And so like you can't really refute that, right, when someone does share their story, because that's their own personal experience. So I think for me, that is what I enjoy the most. Also, because I don't know, you're speaking truth into power, right? When you do share your own story, and this is my reality. And it's something that we all do like across communities, right? Is to share our stories. And that's how we find meaning. That's how we educate others on what our values are, right? When it's rooted in storytelling. So yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts.
I love that. That is storytelling is so it's such a common thing in many cultures, right? That's like how a lot of cultures they understand the the next generation understood the history, right? It was just all through telling the story, and that's beautiful. I actually took a storytelling class
That's
in
so
grad
cool.
school. Yeah, yes. My professor, I think he was just making it up as it goes, honestly. It threw a lot of my peers off. They were like, what's the point of the syllabus? We're not following it. Like, what's going on? But I forgot his name, but it's such an older gentleman, and his presence was just like it was I would describe it as light. You know what I mean? Just like light and curiosity, and encouraged us to to take storytelling and to be able to apply it into our therapeutic work. And I don't know, just thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna want to do a bit more of that,
Yeah.
right? When I do my the work with my folks, but thank you for highlighting the importance of storytelling. thank you for highlighting that that everyone's story, it matters. I think Alicia Keys has a song that says that you are the narrator of your life, right? So your experiences, your past, everything, it matters. And to be able to share it with others, kind of like how you were talking about earlier, how you had the Salvadorians and the Haitians like coming together to have each other's backs because they had to share each other's stories. That, and look at that. What ends up coming out of that? A beautiful thing, solidarity. See, something that we forget too is that we are better in community. We are better. We are stronger. We are more capable. We are I would even say smarter, right? We're just able to do more when we are in community. And honestly, Ellie, that was the main reason why I wanted to have you on this podcast, because of the work that you do, but because of just that, like, community. And we need that now more than ever. So I'm glad that we hit the dicey areas. I'm glad that we talked about the politics, because this is the stuff that we're living right now. Like, and so what is something that we can take out of this? Like, we do better when we're together. We do better when we're united. So thank you for just highlighting that piece of like, let's tell stories. Let's tell each other our stories. Let's listen and actually listen and validate.
Yeah, if I could even add on to that too, is like adding on to the point of like being in community, it just makes us stronger too. I think, you know, like you were saying, Darian, like telling each other a story. I think of it from, you know, the picture of you have someone who is a U.S. citizen and you have someone who's an immigrant. Two different, you know, perspectives, two different upbringings and different statuses. And there may be a lot that you, probably more that you disagree on than agree on, but you could still make that space to just hear each other's story. And I think, like you were saying, the main thing of listening is listening to understand, empathize, and kind of just like see from the other perspective that you just can't have by being in your own perspective. How much smarter. And I love that you chose the word smarter, because really you really are more smarter when you learn from someone else's experience and perspective, you know? Although I am a U.S. citizen, I am Haitian. I'm not an immigrant, you know, like my parents were, but I could definitely look over the politics of what's going on currently in Haiti and really understand, okay, like things are different than how I'm living. And even though I am Haitian, I can understand like how they're dealing with like everything that's going on there. Like it makes me have a different perspective, a different understanding of, you know, life in the United States. Same thing if I were to relate to someone else from different countries, like you'd have that added level of you know, knowledge and perspective. So I think there is a benefit to hearing a story, but just as much as so there's a benefit to sharing your story as well. So I feel like both sides are just equally important. So yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Joe, have you wrapped that up so nicely? Although
Oh.
all those thoughts, that was such a good, like, yeah, talking points that you put together. And yeah, that really resonates because I feel like so much about sharing your stories and being in community one another, you also build empathy too. And like that Ian was saying, that does make you a smarter person because you're more like emotionally smarter too, right? And like maybe you'll never, you know, like although similarly, Joab, my parents are immigrants. You know, I didn't immigrate to this country. I have friends that are immigrants and other family members. Even though I don't understand fully that experience or even how it is, like I could still empathize, you know, for folks that do immigrate to this country and have to start over again because they're seeking refuge, a better life, right? And so, yeah, I think building empathy is a huge part of that and just finding meaning in one another as well.
I was just looking at the three of us and I was like, okay, so we're all American, right? Because we were all born here. But you have a Salvi, a Haitian, and a Dominican.
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like three different cultures just like coming together and just having a conversation.
Now, real question is, who makes the best plantains?
Oh, I feel
Bueno,
like
yo.
that's a tricky question. Do you want me to press leave?
Excuse me. Okay, ma'am. First of all, I have a lot of respect for El Salvador. Okay, y'all,
No,
listen.
I'm saying leave because I want to be friends with you both forever.
You know what? That was the dicey question. That was the dicey territory.
I'm definitely wrong for that. I could equally say that I feel like a lot of the food from all of our respective countries are really good. So
yes, just
I'll
my
leave it there.
country is just better.
See, now you could have chose the humble route and the
No,
modest route. Wow, dang.
I'm just choosing
All
what's
right.
the vibe in 2024. Like mine is better.
I was choosing the humble route because I was like, yeah, El Salvador is not in the Caribbean, so I was gonna say I'm gonna leave that to you. I mean, we definitely do like fried plantains and a lot of stuff with plantains, but yeah, I was like,
I will never. This is a fun little story. I will never forget Iliana's sister. We were eating someplace, and she goes, "Do you want elote?" And I was like, "What elote?" And I was like, "Come again?" And then I was like, "Dang, this Spanish, the Spanish, like I can't. Like, why it has to be so different?" And she pulls it up. It's corn, like corn on the cob. And I was like, "Maíz? That's how you say corn." And she goes,
Yeah,
she's like,
in Creole.
yeah. And she goes, yeah, no, it's only maíz when it's chopped up. She's like, is that what and she goes like this, is that what Dominicans call it? I was like, first of all, what's up with that face? What's up with that face though? I love you, Kayla. I love you, Kayla. She's like, no. And then she started laughing. She's like, no, this is what we call it when it's like in this form. And I was like, oh. And I had a Dominican friend and I was like, it's called elote. He goes, what? It's maíz. I was like, boy, I don't even know. We learned something new today.
they have different words for things, but we all come together at the end of the day like this podcast.
Yes. Let this podcast.
I love them bringing it together. All right.
Emoji.
I love it. Okay, Illy, I do have a final question for you. Final question. In your bio, it mentioned how you are the what was it? Was it owner and founder? I'll have to go back.
Oh, I thought you were going to mention the 30 under 30, and I was like, I know, I'm not 30 anymore. I thought you were going to mention that.
Iliana, first of all, girl, we're friends. I got your back. I'm a girl's girl. I got your back.
I know,
also, stop it. I never told the people my age. So girl, stop talking. Okay.
I'm done.
You can tell the people my age. I just thought that was the route you were going to.
No, I wasn't gonna. Although that 30 under 30 celebration, I had a lot of fun that night.
It was so much fun. It was
a lot of fun. And let me just tell you, Iliana had like a cohort of people that it came out to like celebrate.
And
like some people had like 4 people. Nah, there was like 15 of us.
Deep.
It was a lot of fun, and thank you for being there, Darian. And
no,
there too.
Girl. Of course. Thank you for the invitation. I mean, to have been there, to see my friend, get that accomplishment, get that award at such a young age. Like, I remember just standing there, I was like, wow, Iliana's amazing. And this is just the beginning. Mm-hmm. This is just the beginning. So I do have actually 2 questions for you. Let me actually ask one question, and then I'm going to go back to my other question I wanted to ask you. With the bit of the political talk that we have, right? And you saying like everything in life is politics, right? Because of how you show up. Have you ever thought about getting into it, my friend? Have you ever thought about running for an office?
There was like a time in my life when I was younger, when I was like, oh, like running for city council would be cool, but like very, very local, not anything like state level or anything.
So you don't want to be the next president? Like, you don't want to be,
But then I was like, no, I don't think I want to do that, especially having to interact with like so many like local elected officials and everything afterwards. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. But if there was someone that I really like believed in and was like a woman of color, like local, like elected leader candidate, and I could be a part of like their cabinet in terms of like helping their campaign and elect them, like volunteer to do that in the side, I think that that would be fun to do. Um, but no, not on the center. I think at one point I was like, oh, that could be cool. But then I was like, no. Understanding more of like the realities of it, I was like, I don't think I want to do this.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
So that Ian, that means if you ever want to run for something and
Girl, why would I run? I'm the one that calls you and be like, what am I voting for? I'm just kidding.
Wow.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
no, but sometimes that's like the honestly, sometimes that's like
Yeah.
the like local elected leaders that it's just
Yeah.
like, you know, I'm more about like programs and resources. Like imagine if you're like you ran on like a mental health like platform and like, oh, we need more centers or we need more funding around this in XYZ city. That would be really cool.
Well, it's true. We do, because actually that could actually reduce the cost of like hospitalizations, which that could therefore reduce the cost for like the state and having to like cover it. So yes,
Ian, it sounds like you have a platform.
Stop! You set me up. You set me up on that one. But I don't speak politics at the end of the day, at least. So I'll leave that up to you. Joab, fix your face.
What?
Fix your face. Joab, fix your face. I thought I had friends. I had friends.
As a friend, that is a lie. That all you speak to me is politics. Okay,
Stop.
So I don't even know what you're talking about.
But again, that's the best. I think elected leaders that you're not trying to like pander to people, right? And
well, yeah. See, that's the thing. I cannot. Like, you know, when I said that statement earlier, I was like, I could care less what you do in your voting booth. What I'm trying to say is like, I do care. I care about people. I care about communities. I care about, like, Illy, you and I have shared values. Like, you know what I mean? It's very similar, right on. Like, if you ever want to run for something, I'm like, that's the girl. But you know what I mean? But what I'm saying is like, when I say I don't care, like, I'm not going to pander to people. I'm really bad at actually like, was it in past jobs, you know, when you had like the CEO or the president or the higher up coming out, I would just be that person and be like, I'm gonna be in my office. They're like, well, it'd be good if you have a conversation. Why? Well, it'd be good because therefore you can go on and ask for something. I'm like, if they don't know that they need to provide me with the resources for me to do my job properly, then I don't know why they're holding this position. Like, that's my attitude. Like, why am I going to kiss your butt to get something? Type thing. And maybe I'm saying it a little too brass. Maybe I'm like just diminishing it, but I just no, like, if you believe in doing right, providing for people's needs, right? We all should have free healthcare. Amen to that, right? We should reduce the cost of like living significantly, right? People should get paid very decent, you know, wages, right? Have decent benefits. If this is all the stuff that we believe in a common unity, I'm not going to sell my soul or I'm not going to trade something so you could get something so therefore I can help the common good. I'm like, no, we should just all be in the same boat. So that's what I mean. Like, I don't speak that language. I don't have the tact for it. Some people have the tact. Some people have the skill. I just be like, you know what you have to do. And I know what I have to do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear that. That resonates because, yeah, there's a lot of that of like, you scratch my back and now I need help with this thing. And then it's not actually something that your values are aligned with. But then it's like, you did this for me. So now you have to, so there's a lot, I feel like there's a lot of that. But then, I don't know, I think like more of, like I'm mentioning and sort of what we've been talking a lot of my passion is more in the community and not so much like inside, you know, like playing this inside game. I've also been there where folks from the community have run on like good progressive platforms. And sometimes you need someone that's actually in the inside because there's some like communities or cities where, you know, you don't actually have an ally inside. So then some folks in the community are like, let's all run together, you know, 4 or 5 of us will run together and at least like 2 of us have to get in, and then that's how you start building. So I appreciate and admire that too. I just think more of my passion and excitement lies outside of like city hall chambers, for example.
Yeah, and my passion lies in telling people that we need more mental health resources, not being able to be the one to just say, I'm going to run on this platform. Like, but I appreciate that perspective that you brought up, like needing someone on the inside for sure. 100%. I
It's
just,
just not me. I'm just like,
that's
recommend you someone else.
exactly. Now, when I was saying too, like when like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Like there is like that's how the world has run. Like we'll do some trading, right? Like here's some pistachios. I'm really my people are very good at my country's good at producing, and we traded for some oranges that your country's really good at producing. Like I see that, and that is important, but the inside job and doing the talking and this and that, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, but we do need more mental health resources. I'm glad that we need more centers.
Yes, we do. More agency centers, good paying jobs.
Yes, 100%. Start paying your interns too for those. That's something that I would truly run on. Like pay your interns. Okay. All right. So Iliana, for now, you're just like, no, I'd rather just do the work, be with the community, right? And if someone else wants to do this, then I would be open to being part of their team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll ask you this question 5 years from now. Okay. All right. So now I want to make sure that I got this correct. Aha. Co-founder of We Ceremony. I was going to say something totally different. So I'm like thinking as I look back. We Ceremony. I remember when you started We Ceremony and such. So what's going on with We Ceremony? I know it's taken a break or it's no longer running. Please correct me on that. So what's up with it? What's going on?
Thanks for asking that, Ian. Yeah, so it's not running anymore. It's no longer like active. But I guess for like some context, my best friend and I, we co-founded We Ceremony, and it's like this digital platform that we use to uplift like digital storytelling among women of color in the Boston area. And so Moo and I started this. I was in grad school, and Moo was like having one of her first, jobs outside of college. And so we really began this platform for ourselves because I think as we were, after college and just like moving up in different places, I think we were seeing less folks that look like us or have similar experiences. So we built this platform for ourselves, and through that we built like a website, and we grew like a social media following, and we had different like events around Boston, and it was a really good and exciting time. And it's really beautiful that even after like so many years, sometimes like if Moo and I are out or if I'm out somewhere, like I will recognize someone that came to like an event or that maybe we interviewed, and they'll be like, oh my goodness, like how's everything going? So I think that that's very sweet. But yeah, we're no longer running. I think just with like work and just taking up more responsibilities, it was hard to have something on the side and then also have your like full-time job.
Gotcha. Okay. I wanted to finally ask. So I was like,
I'm glad you asked.
But I do remember you starting it in grad school, and it was such an amazing thing. So I was like, oh, what happened? I want to know what was going on.
It was really good. It was a lot of fun too. I think like I think something that maybe is coming out a lot is I have a lot of interest areas too. Like there's like a lot of things that I'm interested in. And it was just like, honestly, we just got to yap like all the time with people that we just like met, and like yap and snack. Two of my favorite like top.
Yes. Iliana loves a good snack.
Yeah, a good sweet treat after doing one task. And you're like, okay, I need a Rice Krispie because I did such a good job. It's like a nice pat on the back. It was very cute. It was a very sweet time as well. I love how Marian is still laughing because she knows it's like, do you guys have chips or do you have like something sweet?
Joab, she is that guest that comes into your house and goes into your cabinets to find the
I
snack.
cannot.
If she knows you, she's comfortable.
Yeah,
Let me
so,
know.
like,
Oh yeah, you gotta put that disclaimer because I'm like, whoa.
I'm like, Iliana's not an ill-mannered person. No, she knows you very well.
and we've known each other for like 10 plus years now, right?
Yeah, girl.
Yeah.
Dang, yeah.
Yeah, so we're family, but it's not like,
Yeah.
that I do this like, oh, I'm comfortable with you even though we just met, and I'm like, what do you have? No.
We went to the beach house, like I like I said, the beach house, like as if I own it. We went to a beach house together and we had like a nice little stay, a nice little girl stay. And the first thing on the list, Iliana's like, get snacks. Like Iliana was the one that wrote the things that we needed, first of all, for this little trip. And it was
Prioritize.
get our snacks. And I said, woman after my own heart. Absolutely.
Like, what were we thinking about food? And I was like, I feel like we should start developing a grocery list. And then I was like, well, these are some of my favorite snacks. You can write down your favorite snacks and things you like to eat at the beach, but it wasn't like get snacks. It was more like a grocery list.
Oh, I apologize, Iliana. I apologize. It was a grocery list. I stand
Everyone
corrected.
in this podcast is going to think I'm comelona that are... And someone's going to be like, give this girl some food. She doesn't eat.
She's a muerta de hambre. This lady. No, it was a groceries list. And I think, yes, their chips were there and coffee. Because, yeah. You had Hispanics going to a beach house. What do you need? Cafe, for sure.
Definitely need coffee. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. Cafe for sure. Oh my goodness. That was a fun time, Illy. Such a fun time. Okay, so to end this, right, because I'm also being mindful of the time. And I was like, my girl's busy. She's got to move on to the next thing. The way we like to end our podcast, right, like an episode that we're doing with someone, especially when we're doing an interview, is I like to ask this question of, what would you tell your younger self, right? If your younger self was in front of you, right? Or what would you tell that the other Iliana in this world? Like there's other Ilianas in this world, meaning other folks who have that same passion as you do for community, right? For helping others, right? For advocating, to fight justice and such. So what would you tell them? What would you tell your younger self, or what would you tell the other Ilianas in the world?
This is such a good question. I love this question. I think if I was telling my younger self something, I would say, that's a good question. I just need a second. I think first, just that you're beautiful. I think, like, when you're growing up and you're growing into like a young woman, you're just like comparing yourselves to others, and I would say that experience is actually kind of mutual. I think across like genders, you're kind of growing into yourself, but like, yeah, just that you're beautiful, that you're intelligent, and to sort of like have more, I think, faith in your abilities as a person too. Because I think sometimes, like as a young person, and even I think sometimes now too, of just like a lot of self-doubt, maybe sometimes of like, should have I done that better maybe, or like, do I actually know enough about like this area? And then I think in terms of other Ilianas in the world, that's kind of like a funny and also scary thought at the same time. And having little like twins of you everywhere else. But I would say just to like continue going and to continue being open to like opportunities that come your way. And to just like continue having a commitment to like growing and learning in community. That's what I would say.
I love it. I love it. Illy, the work that you do and the passion that you have, just to touch on a little bit on the faith end of things, right? It's so biblical, because even like in the Bible, it encourages us to to be there for the widows, right? To support those who are oppressed, right? And to fight for justice. So just thank you for just being such a living embodiment of that, to you and to your colleagues, right? To others who are in your field, like our community organizers, workers. I know Andrew must have been incredibly proud to have seen you all those years later, and just to remember you as a little girl, to probably seeing like, wow, this woman is in front of me and she's just, continued the fight, the good fight. So to all of you who are doing that, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know that community workers have helped my family in some ways, right? Or my family has gotten involved in helping the community for sure. So let's just thank you. Let's continue fighting that good fight. Let's just be there for one another. Let's just finally be that awesome, solid community that Ilya and her peers are definitely fighting for. So, Iliana, I love you.
I love you. Thank you both so much for having me. This was so much fun.
We need to have you on again.
Yeah,
for sure. All right, everyone. Remember, be in tune. Peace.
Hi, everyone. My name is Iliana. Subscribe and follow below for the Be in Tune podcast. You can listen on Spotify and other streaming platforms.